All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Excited to introduce our guest today, Jeff Borello. Jeff is the CEO and co-founder of Andromeda Technology Solutions, a leading managed IT services provider specializing in the manufacturing sector. With over 30 years of experience and $9 million in annual revenue, Jeff has successfully guided Andromeda to serve more than 500 clients by eliminating recurring IT challenges and enhancing cybersecurity for businesses with 25 to 200 Windows users. So, Jeff, welcome to the show.
Lisa, it's great to be here. That was a mouthful.
Yes, it was. So, share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
It started 30 years ago, so some of it's a little hard to remember. It gets a little fuzzy as you get a little older. But yeah, myself and my two co-founders, 30 years ago, we all worked for the same company right down the street from where we are today. And we worked hard there. And that was a great place to work, but they were often struggling. And one day, one of us walked in, little argument on who it was. Well, I can say, if we're going to work this hard, we should do something for ourselves. And at the time, we were taking care of the computers and the networks there. So we said, let's go start a computer and networking business. And we did it we kept our jobs. We did it nights and weekends. And slowly, I went part-time at both jobs. And eventually, it ended up with all three of us. And we've grown to just about 40 employees now. And the three of us are still here, still every day doing what we need to do. So it's been a really good run.
Yeah, it's so funny because I know that when I talk to people who wanted to be an entrepreneur or start a speaking business, it's please don't quit your day job without some kind of financial backing, because it's really hard at the beginning. And it looks like you've really pushed through and taken it from the 3 people to 40 now. So what do you think are some of the turning points or decisions that helped you grow like that from that small startup to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think it starts in the beginning with just you do whatever it takes. You do every job that there is, and you go during the day and service the clients, and you come home at night and make proposals. And you really got to be willing to put in that time in the beginning when it's just you and a couple other guys. And it's a slog, right? And you have to have the grit and the wherewithal to stay at it. But then as we get a little older, one of the things we did probably starting 15 years ago, we started expanding out into other businesses. So we acquired some companies along the way. So we did business telephone systems. We did physical security for buildings, so cameras and that kind of thing. And then even we bought a website design business at one point. So we got really wide. Now, since then, in the last 5 years, we've spun all that back out. We sold it off. The last business we sold last year now, to one of our technicians, and went back to just being a IT-focused company. We thought there'd be a lot of synergies between those businesses, and to some extent there were, but it was just for a small company, it got really hard to try to penetrate different markets. So we said, let's go back to our bread and butter. Let's go back to what we know. So I think when we made those decisions to go wide, it was a good decision at the time. It helped us grow. It helped us build a good customer base. But then I think the decision to go back to more of a mono-focused company was a good decision. So those were some of the big areas for us. And then the latest big thing we've done is a couple of years ago, we said we want to get back to specializing on a single niche industry, and manufacturing is where we've been putting all our time and effort and our learning, and that's been a really good pivoting point for us. So we've been enjoying that.
And it's interesting how you found your pivot to manufacturing. My speaking business, I pivoted into manufacturing, construction, and the skilled trades now in 2016, and it really does make the difference when you become that expert in that one area. And I also think, as you were talking, there's probably some lessons to people listening to the show today who want to grow and expand and grow wide like you did. Here, acquisitions going on every day, especially when people don't have that next generation to come over to take over the business. So they're going to sell and somebody else is going to swoop them up. So for the people who are really considering perhaps going in that direction and taking on other available companies that may or may not be in their niche, what would be your words of wisdom to them?
Yeah, be very careful. I think there were some benefits to it. I'm not typically a guy that looks back and says, boy, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that, because it's all part of your journey. But be very careful. Even businesses that seem very related, they're not, right? So coming up with a strategy, a 3 to 5 year strategy for our IT company was very different than coming up with a 3 to 5 year strategy for our building security company. And when you're a smaller team, I still consider 40 people a small team. We have 5 people on our leadership team. That's a lot of brain power it takes to try to manage one strategy, let alone 2 or 3. So you better really think about and be very careful about getting into areas that maybe are not your specialty, or maybe they are, but it takes a lot of effort, double, triple the effort of what it takes to do the one. And one's enough generally.
Other thing that I think about that, again, people are starting a manufacturing business and maybe it's just a couple guys in a shop that are putting things on, and then they start bringing people in. Your journey in a different industry.
Yep.
So how has your transition from that hands-on tech expert to CEO, managing 40 completely different people, what was that? What has that taught you about leadership and building that strong culture within your company?
Yeah, that first piece is just you always have to be learning, right? I had to learn how to be a technician, right? We did that by going to the bookstore and buying a book and reading it. That was back in the day, right? But then at some point you had to learn, okay, now we have to purchase. What's that look like? And purchase orders. And then you had to learn how to do marketing. So I think that constant learning has to be there as you transition from one role to the other and ultimately up to, I always had the CEO title. If you're out fixing computers, are you really the CEO? And then the other thing that's really been valuable for us was having those partners, right? So that you could take a vacation and know that there were guys back that had your back and knew how to get things handled. But then, yeah, it's just that transition to, okay, now you have to understand what motivates people and how to engage your team and how to build big benefits packages. And it's just always learning, staying flexible, and figuring out what's next, and then being able to figure out what's next in the journey and then go spend some time learning how to do that.
And what have you found when it comes to your workplace culture? What have you found that has really helped in not only attracting people to want to work for you, but then keeping them once they join your organization?
Yeah, and that's certainly changed over 30 years, right? Our one of our very first employees has been here 21 years. He's still here. He came on when we were a scrappy startup, right? We would work all night, and then we had appointment scheduled the next day, and we'd work the next day. That won't carry all the way through, because eventually the scrappy startup doesn't attract people as you get bigger. So we've definitely had to learn benefits packages and what people want. And one of the things we've done is we've won best places to work in Illinois the last 3 years in a row, which we are extremely proud of. And one of the ways we accomplished that was by surveying the staff and saying, okay, where are we short in the benefits, or what does make this not a great place to come to work? And then making the adjustments. So I think it's that constantly listening to the team, figuring out what makes sense for everybody and what you can do and what you can't do. And especially in the IT tough industry, there's always problems. You're always trying to solve somebody else's issue, and it's hard. But in the average turnover for a technician in this industry, they usually stay a couple of years. And our average tenure here is 7, which is just astronomically high in the industry. So I think we've spent a lot of time listening and trying to intentionally build a place that was going to be a good place for people to hopefully finish out their careers.
And it's interesting, you talked about the best places to work. I was just working with a client this week, and they were talking about just going through the process of what does it take, whether or not they achieve it, and it would be awesome if they did, but just really paying attention to what does that questionnaire look like, and just to go through the process can be a really great practice in itself.
100%. There's things to learn. And matter of fact, I'm pretty sure the first year we applied, we did not win. But yeah, you look at that but you get the survey back, right? So even if you don't win, you get the survey results back, and you can see the areas where the staff says, oh, we thought we had this great paid time off policy, and it turns out they hate it. And then you adjust from there. So it goes back to that learning. You always got to be learning and listening to the team. But yeah, I think it's a great exercise, whether you win or not. And I think you learn a lot from it.
Yeah, yeah. Besides the fact that manufacturing is the coolest thing on the planet, why did you choose manufacturing as your focus when you were dealing with so many other industries to begin with?
Yeah, so we had never specialized all on purpose anyway, but we did for many years. We had ended up with a lot of customers in the medical arena. And it was good. We learned a lot. We did niche down there a little bit, but that industry has changed a lot. I was fortunate enough, I was at a conference and I was lucky enough to get seated next to Jack Stack at a luncheon. If you're familiar,
Oh, great
right?
book. Love that
Legend,
book.
legend in
Yeah.
the industry. So I'm literally sitting next to Jack, and Jack's talking, and he starts talking about this renaissance of manufacturing coming back to the United States. So this was a couple of years ago, and how the government's going to start putting money back into manufacturing in the States. And it was about that same time where I knew the medical was changing enough. And I've always, in 30 years, I've always wanted to be more of a specialized single industry provider, but it's really hard to do and it's really scary to do. But that kind of always constant desire, the change in the medical, and then this conversation with Jack, timing is everything. It all came together. And I came back to my leadership team and said, let's give this a try. It's an exciting industry. The three founders, we came out of a little bit of a manufacturing kind of background, so we were familiar with that, and it was going back to our roots. So it was really just a nice confluence of all those events that said, this is going to be a fun run.
Yeah. And just in case there's anybody listening that goes, who the heck is Jack Stack?
Yeah.
He wrote one of the greatest business books ever called The Great Game of Business. And when it comes to workplace culture and being completely transparent, painfully transparent with your employees,
Yeah.
he tells you how to do it, and man, it works.
Yeah, and The Great Game of Business is a great book, but then you also get the history of Springfield Remanufacturing Corporation and just how they got their start. And again, they were digging out from a big hole. It's a great story, and Jack's it was a phenomenal opportunity to spend an hour sitting next to him. And again, it's timing and fortuitous events. Like I could have been at the table, but across from him, but I was actually sitting next to him that really spawned the conversation. So it was pretty cool.
Wow. Wow. It's funny. I think the most fortuitous person that I sat next to very early in my speaking career, I sat down at lunch with Harvey McKay
Oh,
from with the Sharks.
yeah, the envelopes.
I gave Harvey a copy of my very first book, got my picture taken with him. Even Harvey McKay has my book. And
Nice.
a year later, he asked me if it would be okay if he featured my book in his syndicated column that went to 2 million subscribers.
Oh,
So
awesome.
I will forever be grateful to Harvey, but that is super cool meeting Jack Stack, because I talk about him a lot with my clients and recommend that book. So I'm really glad that you did that.
Yeah, it was very cool.
So what about the hidden vulnerabilities in manufacturing? With IT, there's so many things that you have to do. Like you said, there's projects that you're going to be working through the night through, and hopefully AI and technology is getting to the point where we're not having to do that as often. But in manufacturing, there are those hidden vulnerabilities. So how are you helping people prevent those recurring IT issues?
Yeah, so there's a couple things when everybody hates to talk about it, but it's the first thing I always talk about, and it's the first thing everybody should talk about is security, right? You cannot undertake any project now or any change in the environment in the plant, anything. The first conversation has to be, how does this affect security? Bringing a new software package, great. How are we gonna lock it down from the bad guys? Because the bad guys are out there, they're knocking at the door every single day, and you have to make security front and center. So that's always point number one. And then point number two is we really try to approach things differently. And you talk about it. IT is very frustrating for people, right? You just want to sit down. I want to do my work. I don't want to have the computer glitch out. I don't want to have this, that, or the other thing. So one of the things we really do try to do differently is we try to understand, okay, what's the root cause of this problem and solve it once and for all so it doesn't keep coming back. If that means the bookkeeper has a 6-year-old computer that really needs to be replaced, then we're going to recommend we get it replaced. And then the other thing we really do is we really try to sit down with our clients, and we want to be a strategic partner of theirs, right? We don't want them to think about IT as an expense because it's a critical part of the business now. So we sit down with them and we'll say, okay, talk to me about where the business is going in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, and let's start putting a technology roadmap together so that we can map out where you need to get to, and we're not scrambling around last minute when we find out we have to replace a bunch of hardware because you're going to change your ERP system. So the planning is definitely a big part of it. And we spend a lot of time talking to the clients about that. And we really find there's a pretty good fork between those that want to invest and make it a strategic advantage and those that don't. And I think for those that don't, and they're not really looking at the 4.0 of the industry or looking at AI as the next thing, they're going to get left behind, and it's going to be a problem at some point where the technology, you got to keep up with it. And it's because it is a strategic advantage on the business side, I think.
And when we talk about technology, and just in the 2 years that I know that I've been using ChatGPT and getting involved with every day for everything, technology is coming at us at a pace where it was just not even thought about 3 years ago. Where are you seeing this going with the work that you're doing? And that can go in a lot of different directions from we talked about the security, but is the risk going to be heightened now with AI and everything like that? And how do you not just get totally lost with everything how do you know that you're doing the right things?
Yeah, I think part of it is do the shameless plug here a little bit, but you got to have the right partner, right? And there's plenty of manufacturers out there that have internal IT staff. Now, a lot of times they're not IT staff. A lot of times it's an ERP software person, or they'll shoehorn some people into multiple roles. And it's in the IT world's gotten too complex for that. Every year somebody comes out and says, "Oh, there's a new thing that's going to come out and we won't need IT people anymore. The cloud is going to," it's so much more complex than it was 2, 3 years ago, that you really need the right partner and the right team to be making sure that somebody is proactively looking at the business. The couple of people, the couple IT teams that you have internal they're overwhelmed. I guarantee every IT person out there is overwhelmed, and they're just trying to keep up with the day-to-day things that are broken. They don't have time to plan. They don't generally have time to look at what's out there. And then throw in the people that are outsourcing to a managed service provider like us. And there's plenty of great ones out there, but there are a lot of really bad ones. And having a really bad IT provider causes a lot of problems. You probably have security holes you don't know about. You're having productivity issues that you don't know, you can't solve. So I think all that is you got to find the right partner that is going to work with you, understand your budget, understand where your business is going, and make sure that you're getting, again, I'm going to say strategic advantage of having the right partner to try to fill in some of those holes. Because yeah, every one of these, you got some data in the cloud and you're pulling it down to the office, and then you got some AI at, all those are just possible security risks that you really need to understand to make sure that you're not going to be the next person that shows up on the news.
How are you getting the buy-in of there's an IT department, they think that they're doing a pretty good job and that maybe they don't want to admit that they're overwhelmed and burned out and confused by everything changing every other minute. So how do you help leadership to get the buy-in to say, listen, we're here to help you? Not like the government, we're from the government, we're here to help.
Yes.
No, we're not doing that. But how are you making them okay with the fact that you are coming in to essentially do what they're paid to do?
Yeah, I think the first it's all about positioning of it, right? Because we are absolutely not there to take their jobs. We don't want to take anybody's jobs. There's plenty of work for everybody. So we really start that story from the get-go. And it's never that they're not doing a good job. It's just they need help, right? They're overwhelmed. So yeah, it's hard for people to admit that, right? No one wants to admit to their boss that I don't know or I can't. So one of the things, we'll bring one of our engineers out and they'll meet with our engineers, and we have a really good personable team. So one of the things we've always done is hire people that they're great technicians, but they're better people, right?
Okay.
They'll look at your shoes, not their own shoes. That's always the big IT joke.
Yeah.
How do you know an outgoing IT guy? He looks at your shoes, not his shoes. But yeah, and then it's just that constant reiteration of, listen, we don't want your job, right? We want to work together with you. We're here to make you look good. That's one of the things we tell IT. We want to make you look good. And then let them talk to some existing customers, right? Listen, talk to the IT guy at one of our customers, and he'll tell you that we have made his life better. So I think it's just that constant iteration and making sure our story is consistent, which it's easy to do that when you're telling the truth. That just, yeah, it really is. And that really is our core purpose for our company, is helping people succeed. And that's one of our things, is we want to come in here and make sure we can help that IT guy succeed, help the business succeed, and everybody goes home a winner.
What are some of the top tips that you have for manufacturers when it comes to just maybe assessing what they're working with and the need to determine, do they need to bring in an outsourced IT firm, or does something else need to change?
Yeah, I think there's a few things there. One, just at a really high level, is just look at things through a different lens, right? If you haven't had a security assessment done by an outside company ever, or in the last couple of years, get that done, right? We're not saying that the existing team or company isn't doing a good job, but sometimes it's worth just getting somebody to take a peek at it. Then at the nuts and bolts level, right? Multi-factor authentication. If you do not have your Office 365 set up for multi-authentication, as soon as this podcast is over, stop what you're doing, go get your IT guy, your MSP, whoever you need to get to, and get that done, because that is the biggest hole that there is.
Mm.
Second, actually probably the second biggest hole, if not the first, is that you have to have your users getting trained more than once a year on cybersecurity. 95% of incidents happen because somebody just made a mistake. They replied to an email, they clicked on a link, whatever they did, and the way to battle that is constant training. You need a big annual event that probably takes them an hour to go through, and then every week you got to put a micro training in front of them so that it stays front and center and it just keeps it top of mind. That's all it takes. It takes one click and the whole entire operation is shut down. Um, I'm not an insurance guy. I don't sell insurance, but you got to make sure you have a good cyber insurance policy. It should be a standalone policy. Make sure it fits your business because generally these events are not going to be if, they're going to be when. And you don't want to be left holding the bag on trying to figure out how to pay out a ransom or just the amount of money that goes into these incidents from downtime to getting everything rebuilt to getting data restored, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you just need the insurance policy there. So if you don't have one of those, that's number 3 to do. And yeah, I think then the last piece is if you, whatever your IT situation is, again, if it's a lot of people are using outsourced MSPs like us, and they're generally not happy, there are better answers out there. If you don't feel like you're getting well taken care of, if you don't feel like they have your needs at top of mind, then you should reach out and you should talk to somebody else because there are some really great MSPs out there that really will help and they can make things better. And I don't think people believe that. And they think switching providers is a giant hassle. And in some cases it is. For example, we've been doing this 30 years. We've got this down to a science. We take 95% of the work onto us. Very little we ask for the customer to do when they switch providers. Make the introduction, tell your old IT company we're switching, and we pretty much do it from there. So it's not as painful as you think, and there is light at the other side of the tunnel.
Just from a curiosity standpoint, because I know that when my husband first started working for his new company a couple of years ago, they had a ransomware cyber attack. Thank goodness they had some physical backups that they were able to do, so they didn't lose a ton of data. But what's the percentage of people, would you say, that actually pay the criminals? And is there like I don't know if it's an ethics in criminals that once you pay them, they actually give you your stuff back? Because that would be a fear too. So how exactly does that work?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't be able to give you the stats on it there, but yeah, there's 2 schools of thought on somewhat, right? You pay them, and yeah, a lot of times they'll give you your data. Most of they're pretty ethical because they don't want to be known as the guy because then nobody else will pay you.
Yeah.
But once they've gotten in and you've paid them, now they'll come back again.
Yeah.
And it's really hard. Once you've had an incident, it's really hard to get to a spot where you can 100% say everything is clean, right? And the way to do that is throw everything out and get all news. That's not feasible. So there's a lot of forensic steps. There's a lot of re-imaging of devices. That's why, again, big dollars, big money, big time, big downtime. But you're never really sure. And there is incidents of people coming right back a month later and they find another hole and now they ransom you again. So that biggest thing, the biggest differentiator between people paying and not paying generally is the backup. As long as you have a good backup that is well isolated, because one of the other things that happens is they get in the network and they get into the backups and they disable those for a month before they attack you. And that's where people get stuck where they have to pay because now the data's gone too. And then there's the whole data leak scenario where they actually get your data and now they're extorting you that, hey, we'll release some of this data because there's probably all kinds of private information in there, whether it's your customers, their bank account numbers, whatever it may be. There's a lot of highly confidential information that you don't want getting leaked, and that creates giant trust issues with your customer. And that's why it's more than just the incident. It's the trust problem that it creates with your brand.
Wow. Wow, so much. I know that when I'm speaking at an event, if I am following the cybersecurity guy, that is like one of the worst slots because everybody is just terrified. And
I know, and it's one of those. Don't go on there and talk about security because but it's a reality. We can't just put our head in the sand and hope it goes away because it's not. And I know someone listening to this is thinking, I'm too small. They won't come for me. You're not too small. In some cases, the smaller ones are easier. Look, I found this small manufacturing facility and it's only 20 people. And look, there's no firewall or whatever it may be. And there's a lot. And then you start talking about supply chain and they can move up the supply chain, down the supply chain from you. And now you just and places go out of business. They absolutely go out of business over this. There's no question.
Wow. Wow. And I think what you had mentioned too of training your employees, sending them the fake phishing emails to see if
Yep.
people actually click on them, because I'll tell you, some of them look really real. Thank goodness most of the time, if I get something that looks weird, I'll get back to the client and just say, did you send this? And
Yep.
just yesterday, I had one that I asked and they said, do not open. I was hacked and it was a client. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just gets better they get better and more realistic. Scary.
Yeah. And usually, and it catches somebody and I'm hurrying up. I'm doing three things at once and
Yep.
or I got something else on my mind. It doesn't take, it just takes a half a second of just a little you're not 100% focused and now we're off to the races.
Wow.
Yeah.
As we're getting to the end of our time together, is there anything that I should have asked you or you wish I asked you but didn't?
I'm glad we didn't talk about AI because obviously I'm a little bit on the hype's a little ahead of the reality here with the AI scene.
Okay.
It's obviously going to be a game-changing technology, but I think part of it is before you start thinking about how AI is going to, and you should be thinking about it, but you got to make sure the fundamentals are right. Make sure your network equipment is good. Make sure you have a segmented network for security. So I think you got to make sure you got your foundations and fundamentals in place before you start looking at the new shiny thing. And I think a lot of people need to really look at the fundamentals first. And really, if you haven't, we have a very simple security assessment that we just have people, you answer 20, 30 questions and it gets you a pretty good idea of like where you are on the security spectrum. So that's
Mhm.
certainly something I would invite anybody, if you're really curious about your security posture, get in contact with me. We'll get that assessment over to you. There's no obligation. It's just answer some questions. We'll have a conversation about where you are and maybe where some of those holes are. And, think about that first.
Okay.
Beyond that, yeah, I think it's that just proactively thinking about IT as an investment. It's no longer an expense. It's no longer, I do it because I have to. You probably walk out into your office right now and there's probably 5 people who are frustrated because something's not working right and it's not working right every day. And you need to make that better. People don't like to come to that kind of environment and it causes productivity and downtime. And you lose good people over it because they're like, I'll go work somewhere else where they have better stuff. So,
Exactly. As if somebody did want to continue the conversation with you or get that security assessment, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
yeah, I'm all over LinkedIn. Again, it's Jeff Borello. I'm sure we could get to my LinkedIn is up there. Andromeda-tech-solutions.com is the website. It's Andromeda, not Andromeda. Everyone wants to stick an I in there. You did a very
Huh.
good job of pronouncing it, Lisa. Yeah. So yeah, Andromeda-tech-solutions.com. And my email, I'm happy to give my email. It's Jeff B. So JFB at We Network. So WENETWORK.com. Happy to help anybody that's just looking for a conversation. I'm always happy to talk.
All right. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Yeah, Lisa, thanks for having me. It was great.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.